Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Beef, and what I got for you guys today is a full breakdown and a review of the Compton album by Dr. Dre. It was released on August 7th, 2015. Today is August 10th. Only 3 days later, I have had 2 full listen-throughs to the album, so I think I can form my own opinion on the album and also give you guys a full breakdown of the album as a whole. So, first off, this is the 3rd release that Dr. Dre will ever have as an album, or should I say as a solo artist. Obviously he was in NWA and he released albums there, but this is his 3rd solo album and is also his final solo album as far as we know. He announced on Beats One Radio that this will be his last album. After some of the response, I don't know if that's going to be true. I will get into that in a little bit when I get to the opinions, but it is a 16-song album and it has tons and tons of features. I do believe that there's only 2 songs on this album that are not features, and that is the first song, which is an introduction, and the last song. So I don't know if you guys like features. I personally am not a fan of excessive features. I am a believer in, if you're going to have features, you might as well have the album say various artists, not just Dr. Dre, because I feel like that's what this album kind of was. It was kind of various artists, not necessarily just Dr. Dre, but obviously I can make an exception for Dre because he is more of a producer. People don't realize that he is a producer, not a rapper, just because he made The Chronic and The Chronic 2001, and there was tons of great tracks on those albums that were just Dr. Dre rapping. You have to remember that he is still a producer, he is still a businessman. People can say all they want that he has had years and years and years to make this album. It doesn't really matter, and I say that because he's been so busy with business and stuff like that and handling other artists. I can kind of excuse that. I am myself, I'm going into music production, I am a music producer. I'm looking into a career as it, and I can definitely understand where Dr. Dre is coming from a production standpoint. And speaking of a production standpoint, I feel like this album was completely annihilated. He absolutely did a fantastic job with the tracks on this album. I'm sorry if you're looking for a old school flow though, it's not old school MPC style beats. He obviously used some Fruity Loops, he obviously used some Ableton. There's obvious synthesizers used. I'm sorry, he probably did not live and die by the MPC with this album. I hate to break it to you. There's definitely some tracks on this that are definitely repetitive, and even though they are very good beats, they are repetitive, and you can tell that they are used with Fruity Loops. Many producers know and how much Fruity Loops can be used and utilized in the industry. And many producers like myself do get annoyed by Fruity Loops many times because many beat makers like myself really like putting detail and fine-tuning beats, and Fruity Loops doesn't necessarily let you do that, while MPCs and other programs do let you do that. But Dr. Dre obviously did not go all out with the MPCs like he used to do on The Chronic and The Chronic 2001. But my overall full opinions on the album is that it's a very good album for today's standards. If you slapped any other artist's name on this album that wasn't named Dr. Dre, this would be the album of the century. And I'm being dead serious. It would be the album of the century if it was any other name. Not really. Well, not really. It's more like the album of the decade, I should say. The decade, not the century, because the Black Album I think was still better, and so was Stillmatic. But I think that if you're looking at this album as a whole, it's kind of like a very good sequel to Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. And I think that's the best way I can describe it after listening to it 2 times. If you listen to Good Kid, Mad City and then you listen to this album, Compton, right after it, you really do get the same vibes, and that you actually can see that Kendrick Lamar is all over this album for the most part, and that's understandable. Dr. Dre, Kendrick Lamar, both Comptonites, both very good friends in the industry as of late, and I definitely expect Dr. Dre to be producing some more Kendrick Lamar albums in the future, despite Dr. Dre this is his last album, quote unquote. But I'm thinking that's for his career, not for production's sake. But in my opinion, the best track on the album was Genocide, and right now on iTunes, the #1 song is Medicine Man. No surprise there, Eminem's on the track. Eminem absolutely destroys his verse, what's new, yada yada yada. I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of insight of how the overall community is taking this album. I got a definite mix of reviews right here on iTunes. First one, I'll start off on a positive note. It's by a guy named Cali Kings. I just figured I'd mention his username right there, purely because he is a California native, so he will be a little bit biased. But he says album of the century, which is really where I got that. I said mixed up my words earlier, and I said album of the century, not album of the decade. But anyways, he says this is about to be the next big thing and teach all these 2000s babies what real hip-hop is. Fire emojis. This was made before the album came out. And then he has a review later on saying, Dre is the man, but honestly this is not what I was hoping for. Sounds just like every other watered down hip-hop album from the last 5 years. Nas was right, hip-hop is dead. That was definitely a change of opinions from a Comptonite himself. Then another review is a disappointment. This album was the result of an old school artist trying to mix in with the new. A huge letdown and disappointment from the awkward beats and auto-tuned of an album that was so highly boosted. Now, before I go any further into any of these reviews, which by the way, all of these things are exactly the same, all of the reviews are pretty much negative, or at least I should say the written reviews are negative. There's plenty of 5-star reviews on this album. There's an overwhelming amount of 5-star reviews on this album, but there's definitely a lot more 1-star reviews than you would think from a Dr. Dre album. But yet again, his last 2 albums were The Chronic and The Chronic 2001, so what really can you expect anyways? My overall opinion of the album is, yet again I say, it was a really good album. But if you're going to look at the negatives, if you're going to take that standpoint, I understand where you're coming from. But you also have to say, the game's changed. The game is not what it used to be. I mean, I personally love The Chronic, but you really can never get that sound again unless you want to downgrade sound quality. That's my opinion. That really is genuinely my opinion. If you want the old school sound, you're going to have to downgrade quality. And maybe one day someone will do that. I know that as a producer, I'm not willing to do that. That's way too much of a risk. I will not want to downgrade my quality for the sake of sounding like an old school album again. People have tried that before. I've seen it done. It has not worked out well because obviously you have never heard of some of these artists that have done things like that. And it sounds good, but it just does not work in the mainstream music market. And Dr. Dre is somebody who's people have to look at Dr. Dre differently now, okay? He's been a producer for so long. People don't realize that he was a big contributing factor to the game changing to what it is today. He produced a lot of Good Kid, Mad City, okay? He produced a lot of Good Kid, Mad City. That album really did change the landscape of the game at the time. And he's produced tons of Eminem albums before that, and Eminem, we all know, has changed the landscape of the game. Dr. Dre continuously leaves his footprint on the game, and this album is no different than Good Kid, Mad City. You see the direction the game's going towards. I didn't see anything differently from this album. I knew that this album would be like this. I knew that it would be more mainstream. I knew it would be like this. And I don't want to sound like some kind of fortune teller, but if you were expecting the sequel to The Chronic 2001, I hate to break it to you, but that album's irrelevant now. It really is. If social media never existed, I would guarantee that we would be seeing the sequel to The Chronic 2001. But because of social media, because of the way the music market is today, and with all of this like Fetty Wap and Rich Homie Quan and Future and all this kind of wave of new age hip hop, I guess you can say, This is as much as rap and hip-hop as you're going to get nowadays. The game has changed, and Nas said it best: hip-hop is dead for the older guys. That's where I'm going to disagree with Nas. It's not dead, it's dead for the older guys. No matter how good of a rapper Nas is, he's going to be irrelevant unless he changes. He will not change. I know he will not change, but he will stay irrelevant because of that. It's the same thing with Jay-Z. It's the same thing with Dr. Dre. It's the same thing with Eminem. All these rappers, they will eventually become irrelevant or will stay irrelevant because of the changing game. Eminem, I predict, will eventually sell out, and people will still love him for it, but he'll sell out eventually. In my opinion, I thought he already sold out, honestly. He already dropped the Slim Shady, alter ego, I should say, in the last album. I think Marshall Mathers LP 2, he kind of already dropped that ego, and he's pretty much made it clear that he's a serious rapper nowadays. He's not the silly, funky rapper that everyone fell in love with back with the original albums he came out with, like My Name Is and I'm Slim Shady and stuff like that. And the game's changed, guys. The game has changed. If you're an old school rapper, it's hard to get big nowadays, and it's not going to happen. It's really just not. People are just too into the beats, and people are too into everything, like with dancing and stuff like that. And people don't care about lyricism anymore. It's not a thing. It's not a trend anymore. People don't care about the message, because when people try to spread a message, it usually just gets shot down by the media anyways, and the media's opinion. So that's totally separate topic, but I really thought I should touch on that as well with this album, because a lot of the media and how the media perceives lyricism as a whole nowadays definitely affects how this type of album would be perceived in the future. But anyways, guys, hopefully y'all did enjoy the video. My name is Beef. I'm out. And remember, guys, leave your opinions on the album down below in the comment section. Tell me what you thought about it. Peace.